In the mid-20th century, someone had claimed that one of the world's richest countries, one with larger oil reserves than Saudi Arabia, would one day see its people rummaging through trash for food and fleeing their homeland by the millions. It would surely have been dismissed as a cruel joke, yet that is the harsh reality of Venezuela, a nation that was once the pride of all South America. From the dazzling neon-lit boulevards of Caracas to the gushing oil wells deep underground, Venezuela once had it all. So what caused this paradise to collapse? Was it a complex geopolitical conspiracy from the outside? Or a chain of mistakes upon mistakes from within? The story of Venezuela is not just about dry economic figures. It is a painful lesson about power, resources, and the decisions that altered the fate of an entire nation. In this video, we will travel back in time to witness the brilliant rise of the country once called the Saudi Arabia of South America, and analyze the fateful turning points that plunged it into one of the worst crises in modern history. Venezuela's history took a completely different turn in 1922. In the midst of this tropical land, an oil well was discovered, and overnight, it began gushing 100,000 barrels of oil per day. At that time, countries like Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates were still vast deserts yet to discover their black gold. Venezuela quickly became the center of global attention. Giant energy corporations such as Standard Oil and Shell rushed in, building refineries, laying sprawling pipeline networks, and creating modern cities. By the 1950s, Venezuela was no ordinary South American nation. It was the fourth richest country in the world by gross domestic product per capita. The capital, Caracas, was compared to the Paris of the Caribbean, skyscrapers in the most modern architectural styles, wide highways packed with luxurious American cars, and a lavish lifestyle that would make any European nation envious. Venezuelans were so wealthy that they had a habit of flying to Miami, United States, on weekends just to shop for the latest fashion items. The phrase "so cheap, give me two" became a common saying among Venezuelan tourists in the United States. The relationship between the United States and Venezuela at that time could be described as a perfect friendship. The United States needed oil to fuel its booming economy, while Venezuela needed money to build the country. Its advantageous geography was an absolute advantage. From Venezuela's ports, oil tankers took only 5 to 7 days to reach Texas or Louisiana, while oil from the Middle East took up to 30 days at sea. This bond created a 50-50 profit-sharing model, half to the Venezuelan government, half to American companies. Everything seemed to run smoothly, creating a vision of a new superpower in the Southern Hemisphere. Yet behind the glamour of skyscrapers and the royal lifestyle of the upper class, an undercurrent of discontent was beginning to stir. While massive oil money flowed into the pockets of politicians and wealthy families. In distant suburbs, the gap between rich and poor widened. This simmering resentment waited for a spark to ignite, then that spark appeared in the form of a man promising to change the fate of the downtrodden. Venezuela once had it all: oil, money, and opportunity. But abundant resources do not guarantee sustainable wealth. In 1999, a charismatic figure stepped onto Venezuela's political stage. Hugo Chavez, a former army officer with a powerful voice and a folksy style, won a landslide victory in the presidential election. He did not appear as a traditional politician, but as a real-life Robin Hood, committed to restoring justice for the poor. His message was simple, yet extremely effective. Oil belongs to us, the people of Venezuela, not to foreign companies or corrupt elites. In Chavez's view, the 50-50 profit-sharing model with the United States was an injustice that had lasted for decades. He believed Venezuelans were being bled dry by imperialist forces. Chavez began a shrewd political strategy to consolidate power, using oil revenues to directly fund massive social welfare programs. He built housing, opened free hospitals, and set up low-cost food stores for the poor. Poverty rates began to drop, and support for Chavez reached unprecedented heights. He became a symbol of hope, a hero to the forgotten classes. However, Chavez's ambitions did not stop at charity. He wanted full control over the nation's golden goose. In 2007, a new law required all multinational oil companies, such as ExxonMobil and Chevron, to transfer at least 60% of their shares to Venezuela's state oil company. This was a massive shock to international investors. These companies had spent decades investing billions in technology and infrastructure, Now they faced a choice: surrender, control, or leave entirely. ExxonMobil chose to leave, and the Venezuelan government immediately nationalized their assets. Chavez hailed this as a historic victory for national sovereignty. At the time, luck seemed to be on his side, as global oil prices soared from $10 to a record high of over $100 per barrel. Money poured into Venezuela like summer rain, drowning out any warnings about technological shortcomings or poor management with the cheers of subsidy programs. But few could foresee that this hasty nationalization planted the seeds of a technical and managerial disaster that the country would only fully feel years later. When oil money flowed into Islay, Hugo Chávez's government fell into a classic trap of resource-rich nations, spending without investing in production. Instead of using tens of billions of dollars to modernize industrial infrastructure, diversify the economy, or develop agriculture, Venezuela imported almost everything from toilet paper and milk to beef and electronics using petrodollars. Domestic manufacturing, already weak, became even more crippled because it could not compete with cheap government-subsidized imports. Additionally, a highly politicized decision dealt a fatal blow to the oil industry, the backbone of the country. After a major strike at the state oil company protesting government interference, Chavez made a ruthless decision. He fired more than 18,000 experienced experts, engineers, and geologists overnight. These were the brightest minds who knew every valve, every complex refining process for Venezuela's characteristic heavy crude. They were replaced by loyal supporters, military officials, or politically aligned individuals who severely lacked expertise. The state oil company, once one of the world's most efficient, turned into a bloated, bureaucratic, and inefficient machine. Refineries began deteriorating due to poor maintenance. Fires and explosions became more frequent, and most importantly, oil production started steadily declining, even though vast reserves still lay underground. By the 2010s, while people still enjoyed cheap goods from government stores, economic experts began noticing warning signs. Venezuela was borrowing more and more, betting that oil prices would stay high forever. They prepared no backup plan. The whole country was like a giant ship speeding ahead, but its engines were leaking and the best mechanics had been thrown overboard. And just as the ship headed into the stormy waters of the global energy market, a major event in the United States changed the game entirely. While Venezuela was basking in high oil prices across the Gulf of Mexico, a quiet revolution was taking place. The United States, once Venezuela's largest customer and longtime partner, found a way to end its energy dependence. Breakthroughs in horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing allowed America to extract oil and gas from deep shale sources previously considered uneconomical. The shale oil boom turned the United States from an import-dependent nation into the world's largest oil producer, surpassing even Saudi Arabia and Russia. This was not only an economic victory for Washington, but also a powerful geopolitical blow. The United States no longer desperately needed oil from unfriendly nations. As global supply surged, oil prices collapsed painfully in late 2014, dropping from over $100 to under $30 per barrel. For Venezuela, this was an unbearable shock. The entire economy, where oil accounted for over 95% of export revenues, suddenly lost most of its income. While countries like Saudi Arabia had saved hundreds of billions in sovereign wealth funds for tough times, Venezuela was saddled with massive debt from previous spending. Foreign currency for importing food and medicine ran out quickly. Losing its monopoly position, Venezuela faced a dilemma. Refineries in Texas and Louisiana, specially designed for Venezuela's heavy crude, began seeking other sources or changing technology. America's backyard, once a vital energy supplier, now became a land of instability. But why, even after the United States had its own oil, could it not ignore Venezuela? The answer lies in other hidden treasures underground and the geopolitical chess games of other superpowers eager to gain influence in the region. Despite oil troubles, Venezuela remains a literal gold mine. Deep in the Orinoco mining arc in the south of the country lie reserves that any superpower would crave. Geological surveys estimate around 7,000 tons of gold worth hundreds of billions of dollars. It's not just gold. Venezuela has massive diamond reserves, and especially coltan, a rare mineral critical for batteries in smartphones, laptops, and electric vehicles. Because of these strategic resources and its location, just a short flight from United States shores, Venezuela became a target in the struggle for influence among superpowers. As relations with Washington deadlocked, Caracas turned to new partners. China poured tens of billions in loans in exchange for oil. Russia invested not only in energy, but also supplied modern weapons and advisors. Iran began appearing with fuel tankers and drone technology. For the United States, the presence of Russia and China, in a country right on its doorstep, was an unacceptable threat. Washington feared that without control, rivals could place surveillance systems or even missiles in America's backyard, similar to the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is why in recent years the United States has imposed the harshest economic sanctions on Venezuela to prevent Nicolas Maduro's government, the successor to Hugo Chavez, from accessing the international financial system and oil revenues. This confrontation is no longer just Venezuela's problem, it has become a proxy economic and political war between superpowers. The United States claims its actions protect democracy and human rights, while Venezuela calls it an illegal economic war to overthrow a sovereign government and seize resources. Because of calculations on the global chessboard, those who suffer the most are millions of ordinary citizens struggling with hunger every day. From 2016 onward, Venezuela's situation shifted from difficult to full humanitarian disaster. Hyperinflation turned the once strong bolivar into worthless paper. At times, inflation reached millions of percent per year. People needed sacks of money just to buy a loaf of bread or a dozen eggs. Images of banknotes littering streets or woven into handicrafts for tourists became a tragic symbol of economic collapse. The healthcare system, once a pride under Chavez, shattered. Hospitals lacked basics like gauze, bandages, antibiotics, and vaccines. Diseases once eradicated returned to threaten communities. Power outages became chronic, sometimes lasting days nationwide, paralyzing production and daily life. Even the middle class, once prosperous, now queued for hours for meager government food aid. Despair led to one of South America's largest migrations. Over 7 million Venezuelans, about a quarter of the population, left their homeland for neighbors like Colombia, Peru, and Chile, were headed to the United States and Europe. Among them were many doctors, engineers, and teachers, the core workforce needed to rebuild the nation. This severe brain drain made Venezuela's recovery prospects dimmer than ever. Yet amid the darkness of crisis, one big question remains. How could a country with all the ingredients to be a paradise bring itself to such tragedy? Is it just because of oil, or due to systematic mistakes in managing money flows? Looking deeply into the structure of this collapse, we see timeless lessons about national governance and practical economics. Venezuela's downfall leaves 3 major lessons any nation must reflect on. The first and most important: distributing wealth without creating it is suicide. Hugo Chavez was right to want to help the poor, but wrong to think handing out money and subsidies could sustainably end poverty. Poverty can only truly be defeated by building a healthy business environment where companies grow, create jobs, and generate real added value, just by extracting money from the ground to spend. The second lesson is financial management. Using money effectively matters far more than how much you earn. Venezuela earned hundreds of billions during oil's golden age, but ignored diversifying the economy. Putting all eggs in one basket in this case, oil means betting the nation's fate on international market swings. A smart nation uses resource wealth to build foundations for more sustainable industries like agriculture, high-tech services, and manufacturing. The third lesson is harsh but realistic in geopolitics. Strengthened skill and international relations are vital. Provoking leading superpowers when domestic strength is insufficient is a risky gamble. In an interconnected world, self-isolation from global finance and technology leads to rapid backwardness. Venezuela chose direct confrontation, and the price was the economic blockade that left an already weakened economy no room to breathe. Today, when people mention Venezuela, they no longer think of beauty queens on the Miss Universe stage or giant oil wells. They think of divided families and weary eyes waiting for hope. But the resilient spirit of a nation does not allow surrender. Small-scale economic reform efforts and people's adaptability in adversity are beginning to spark tiny glimmers of light. The world is still watching Venezuela's every step. Can this nation find a peaceful way out, revive its oil industry, and most importantly, mend deep social wounds? The answer lies not only in macro policies, but in reconciliation, understanding between factions, and fairness in international relations. Venezuela's journey from peak to abyss is a warning to us all about the value of stability, the importance of knowledge, and the danger of heroism without economic substance. I hope that one day soon, the boulevards of Caracas will shine bright again, and Venezuelans will once more take pride in their country not because they have the most oil, but because they rose strongly after history's harshest lessons.